Now, we have someone who has not denied what has been written about his comments on Trump, and that's Sam Nunberg. Sam Nunberg, a former longtime advisor to Donald Trump, was asked about whether or not he called Trump an idiot, which was reported in Michael Wolff's new book, Fire and Fury. And what he told ABC's The Briefing Room was interesting to say the least. Let's take a look at the first video.
I haven't seen, by the way, today, where was it written that I called him an idiot?
That's in the book. The ABC News has obtained a copy, and that was a quote that's actually from the book. One of the quotes is, this is what you're quoted as saying, is Trump a good person, an intelligent person, a capable person? I don't even know, but I know he's a star. Another quote was referring to Steve Bannon. I believe it was, if you could get this idiot elected twice, you'd go down in history.
Oh, sure. So I may have said that as a joke. I don't believe the president. Look, I think Karen knows me very well. Rick, I haven't spent that much time with you. But I'm from New York, and I'm very sarcastic. I would tell you he's not. I certainly probably said that, but he's by no means an idiot.
Okay, so he's saying that he was joking, was being sarcastic.
Okay, I love the quote. I certainly probably said that. Yeah. In other words, yes, you definitely said it. Now, let's just break down that joke for a second, at the risk of overanalyzing, but it's an important issue. This guy's the most powerful guy on earth, Donald Trump is. So do the people next to him think he's an idiot? The people who helped get him elected, like Sam Nunberg. Well, if you get this idiot elected twice, you're amazing, right? That's the essence of the quote.
But how is that a joke?
Where's the joke, right? Like maybe if you,
well, I mean, not that it's a one-liner, but just that it's sort of like, well, you can get this idiot elected. Like, I would say that about you. I'd say, if they're going to they're going to give this idiot a show. I mean, that's the joking side of it.
No, I get it, Michael, but you would only use that as a joke if you thought the guy was actually really smart. That's why it would be funny. Like Bill Gates. If this idiot could start a company,
but he's saying it because he is now saying that he thinks Trump's smart. And so he's saying, if you can get this idiot elected.
So that's fair. Do you really believe that?
No, but
does anyone really believe that?
Look, the whole point of that comment was to give Bannon credit for getting Trump elected, right? So if you can get this idiot elected twice, you're amazing or whatever. I'm paraphrasing, but he's basically giving Bannon a compliment there because it's like, whoa, you got him elected once. If you could do this twice, incredible.
Yeah, that is the very common sense reading of that quote. Right. If you thought Donald Trump is an obvious genius and you're kidding about how Steve Bannon shouldn't get any credit, then you would say, if you can get this idiot Stiglitz 2 Nobel Prizes, boy, that would be amazing, right?
Yeah.
By the way, Stiglitz does have 2
But
Nobel
also
Prizes.
the other thing is, nobody in the Obama White House is saying, people who like him and think he's sort of saying they're going to get this idiot elected twice. Nobody says that about Obama. Nobody says that.
We're overly
I know.
That's what I mean.
Ridiculously over the top fair in trying to figure out. Of course, it's not a joke. Of course, he thinks he's an idiot.
So the other part about Nunberg in the book has to do with how Nunberg allegedly tried to teach Trump about the Constitution, but couldn't capture his attention long enough to be successful in his efforts. And Nunberg addresses that in this part of the video. Take a look.
One point you're quoted referring to the president as, quote, this idiot. You say at another point that you couldn't say whether he's a good person, an intelligent person, or a capable person, but he is a celebrity. And you recount a really interesting story where you were brought in to explain the Constitution to him, and you say, according to Wolff, I got as far as the 4th Amendment before his finger is pulling down on his lip and his eyes are rolling back in his head. So for starters, Sam, did Michael Wolff quote you correctly?
Well, I'm not familiar, actually. I didn't see those quotes that you said where I called him an idiot or anything like that. But I could tell you, for instance, one, I did sit with Michael. I'm not out here to criticize Michael, but I think Michael used flourish, I'll put it, on the events I described. For instance, I wasn't there, and I told this to Michael, to teach the president the Constitution. The president had a granular understanding of the Constitution. It was good enough. What I was there for was, it was around 8 days before the first debate, and I didn't want him to have any gotcha questions. There were infamous questions that have been given in the 2008 debates. I remember, you'll recall, where Chris Matthews asked Rudy Giuliani what's the difference between a Sunni and a Shia. So I just wanted him, in case he had a gotcha question on the Constitution or on a justice, I put like a little script sheet, a 1.5-page script sheet, and we tried to go over some issues.
Okay, so once again, doesn't deny the quote at all. right? He says he used flourish.
He should skip from the Fourth Amendment right to the 25th, and then why should Trump have to worry about what's in between? And then I like where he says, he had a granular understanding of the Constitution, which is good enough. It's not like he's president.
Yeah, and by the way, that also doesn't make sense. Granular means that he understands the details,
little,
yes.
Of course,
right?
Yes.
Right.
And
he's clearly on his feet.
You wouldn't say like Einstein has a granular understanding of the relativity of physics, and it's good enough.
Right.
Right?
No, he has.
That means yeah, of course it's good enough. He has a granular understanding of it. Maybe all these guys are idiots.
Back on it, and he's just back on his heels. Whenever I hear somebody say, "Well, we're from New York, so we speak," no, we're not. I mean, I'm from New York, and people from New York also give real answers. There's no that they're making excuses all the time, and that's just not a good one.
If you said I'm from New York, so I use colorful language, no problem.
Right.
That's true, right? I curse, that's fine. I joke around, that's fine, okay? But where's the frickin' joke? And in the case
and it's not an excuse for saying, not that he needs one. I'm just saying it doesn't explain it away as it's like locker room talk, right? It's not New York talk.
And in this case, if you actually heard what he said, I was trying to get him ready for the debate because I didn't want a gotcha question. In other words, I wanted him to know what the hell's in the Constitution. That's why we were going over it, and I was pretty sure he didn't know what it was. I mean, do you have to go over the Constitution with Barack Obama? Did anybody say, hey, there might be a gotcha question about the Fourth Amendment, right? So now you might, look, normal prep, et cetera, whatever, but he never denied that Trump lost his attention and couldn't get past the Fourth Amendment because he didn't care.
So since you mentioned Obama, it triggered something for me that honestly frustrates me the most about everything that's going on in the country right now. And it's the insane double standard when it came to Obama versus Trump, right? The fact that if Obama displayed even a tiny fraction of the ignorance that Trump displays on a regular basis, I mean, there would be impeachment hearings immediately.
Right.
Like, I'm exaggerating there, but I mean, we wouldn't stop hearing about it. Obama released his birth certificate, and we can't get Trump to release his tax forms, right? They would not drop that issue. They still don't drop that issue. They still think that he's like some, undocumented Muslim that, somehow managed to scam his way into the presidency. But with Trump, we're not allowed to see his tax returns. We'll not release them. And it's just that double standard drives me crazy. Like the fact that he gets away with acting the way that he acts, but Obama, I mean, he would get criticized for mustard on his burger or whatever.
Across the board. Look what he said to Billy Bush. Look what he said supposedly in this book about the wives of people he works or friends of his, right?
Yeah.
Can you imagine? Forget Obama, Ronald Reagan, the apex of Republican presidents, the presidency for Republicans recently. There's no way. There's no way that they would have let anybody get away. For some reason, he does.
Well, look, now let's keep it real. If there was credible stories about how Obama would screw over his friends to try to sleep with their wives.
Done.
Okay, not only done, but think about the stereotypes that they would bring into play, okay? Then if Obama was-
What, that Muslims do? Oh.
And then think about if Obama was, 1% in the direction of Donald Trump's stupidity, the stereotypes that they would say, if Donald Trump was this stupid and kept saying things like this, if Donald Trump said Puerto Rico is an island surrounded by water, big water, ocean water.
Oh my God.
Okay, what would they say about him? Think about it for a second.
Also, some of the statements that come from Trump, like the big water statement, honestly reminded me of Sarah Palin's interview with Katie Couric and how she said she could see Russia from her house and how much backlash she got for that, how much criticism she got for that. And it's interesting how they held Sarah Palin to a much higher standard than they are to Trump. Like for Trump, he can make those statements on a regular basis and he's still considered smart by his base. But these are the same people that were quick to criticize the intelligence of Sarah Palin. I'm not sitting here trying to, defend Sarah Palin's intelligence. I mean, obviously there were some issues there as well, or at least knowledge. I don't know if intelligence is the right word.
No, she's an idiot. But
okay.
And she didn't read either.
Yeah, that's true. But I don't know if it's sexism or it's just that the standards for Republicans have regressed so far from Bush to Palin to Trump. But Anna's right about the substance of that. Palin is definitely smarter than Trump. That's not even close. So I don't, it might be the regression, it might be the sexism. I don't know why, but a ton of bricks came down on Palin. I think they should have, but 2 tons of bricks should come down on Trump. He's way dumber than Palin. And that is a sentence that was previously unimaginable. If you want to get the whole Young Turks show every single day, become a member, tytnetwork.com/join. And once you do, you'll be saying,
I'm like a smart person.
Or you might say,
I think it's weird.
Or you might say,
oops.
No, that won't be that one. It won't be that one. It'll be great, trust me. tytnetwork.com/join.